Hey everyone, Z-Slayer Dre here, and today I'll be reviewing the latest gacha craze, Zelda Breath of the Wild. No, wait, that's not Link. That's generic character male and generic character female from Genshin Impact, published by miHoYo. I captured the footage on PS4 Pro, although once I was done with the prologue I switched to the PC where I played the rest of the storyline. While there is crossplay between all platforms, you can only cross-save between PC and mobile devices. The developers have stated that due to the limitations of the PlayStation Network, they cannot enable cross-saves at this time. I don't buy that due to the PlayStation 4 players receiving exclusive items, and think Sony simply would not let miHoYo do cross-saves between PlayStation and other hardware. They have stated there will be a Switch version in the future, which is the main reason I would switch to the PC version, not to mention much better frame rates, although I will go over that more later. You start off with a short cutscene that has no context and get to choose between two siblings silent protagonist characters, who you do get to name but will be referred to as the Traveler in their travels. Apparently you've been traveling between worlds, and that's a big no-no in this one, so whichever twin you do not choose will be captured and you will be sent falling down to a strange world you're unfamiliar with. You then jump to 3 months later and start off on a beach with your traveling companion Paimon, who you saved from drowning and set off on your adventure. The art style is very reminiscent of Breath of the Wild, and just like that game, the environment is absolutely gorgeous. Almost everything you see off in the distance you can travel to, and the sense of exploration is wonderfully done. There is literally something to be found around every corner, and the map has a wonderful sense of verticality. The stamina functions similar to Breath of the Wild, where your stamina meter is used for climbing, sprinting, dodge, and power attacks, although to be fair, that describes hundreds if not thousands of games, but it does seem like they were going for Breath of the Wild look and feel. You can climb basically anywhere and jump up ledges to go faster, but using more stamina. I did find the stamina to be very well balanced for the climbing, and I could usually jump my way up if I planned it out correctly. That being said, sometimes certain ledges you can get stuck on, and it can lead to awkward situations where you run out of stamina and fall to your death because you can't climb because the climbing interaction doesn't work perfectly. That being said, it doesn't happen that often, but it is a little annoying when that does happen. As you set off on your journey to find your lost sibling, Paimon will guide you to a statue of Anemo where you receive a blessing that allows you to use wind elemental magic for attacks. While the Traveler can eventually use multiple elements, every other character in your party will have a certain element. Combat is fairly basic, consisting of only a few moves. You have your standard attack that will do a combo if you repeatedly mash the button, or a heavy attack if you hold it down. Both the combo and heavy attack will differ depending on what weapon type your character uses, and each character is limited to one type of weapon. You also get elemental skills and bursts, which are unique to each character's element. The elemental bursts are big attacks that you have to build up with a meter and use, and can be quite devastating. While every character has their own attacks, some of them can be pretty similar in function. The elements can be used in tandem by switching between characters to create status effects which can unleash devastating attacks on enemies, and added a fun layer of depth to the combat. Some elements will be more effective against others, so while you're exploring the world, you have to use a variety of characters to fend off enemies. Dungeons will also recommend what element types are needed for that dungeon, so you have to change your party accordingly. You get a few free characters that will get you through all of the main story challenges, although you need other element types for later game activities, and for that you'll have to deal with a gacha system, but I'll go over that more later in the review. Unfortunately, even with the character switching, the combat is quite basic and gets very repetitive quickly, and this problem is exacerbated when you do co-op and are limited to just using one character in a full group. After reaching the monument, you see a dragon off in the distance who runs off when you approach and drops a strange shard. You then run into Amber, a knight of Favonius, from the kingdom of Mondstadt, who will help clear out a camp of hilly trolls who bear a stark resemblance to enemies from another intellectual property, then head off to the city of Mondstadt. Mondstadt and the surrounding areas where you will spend the majority of the prologue exploring, and while it isn't too long, it does get dragged out a bit due to some of the grind required of the game, along with the exploration. The story, while nothing original, was quite charming at times, and I have to say the characters were all very well done and felt very unique. I really don't want to go into too many spoilers, but the dragon you met has been terrorizing Mondstadt, and it's your job to help the city defend itself, and along the way you'll uncover more mysteries in the world, and find people who will help you find your lost sibling. While there is an overarching plot, it is mostly a set of mini-arcs that slowly add more clues to where your sibling could be. The story is very character focused, and you will get to know them through side missions. And of course, since this is a live service, there are the usual generic daily and weekly missions that do end up being very repetitive, unfortunately. There are also so many other systems in the game, it would be hard to go over all of them, but unfortunately since this is a gacha game, The systems are confusing on purpose to either annoy or trick people into spending money. That being said, you can absolutely enjoy the prologue and more without spending anything, although the further you get into the game, the more shields you run into if you do not spend money, but let's go over that more later, and go over what a gacha game is for those who don't know. While there will be some differences in different gacha games, they do share a lot of similarities. The goal of the game, and many others, is to build up a team of characters and then continually make them stronger by leveling them up and getting stronger and stronger items and weapons. After you get the free 3 characters, you must then use the wish system to get more. The wish system is just another name for loot box, and right now you can get both weapons and items through the loot boxes, although I wouldn't be surprised if they added more things in later. Each character and weapon has a star rating, 1 being the worst and 5 being the best. The 5-star weapons and characters are extraordinarily rare, at a 0.6% chance, which is low even by gacha game standards, I'm told, so for most people, you'll be using 3 and 4-star weapons and characters. 1 out of every 10 wishes is guaranteed to either be a 4-star pull, so 10 wishes is basically comparable to 1 pack of cards, although a pack of cards will retain value and potentially appreciate and can be sold in the future, while wishes are virtual goods that hold no value and will eventually be deleted when the servers go down, so do keep that in mind before spending too much. There are a lot of different currencies, and it's a little bit more complex than how I'm explaining it, but basically speaking, the main one can be either purchased through the store or found in almost everything in the world, including quests and treasure chests. Technically, the one you buy in the store is something different, then you have to transfer it to the other one. It's very confusing, it's done on purpose so you kind of lose track of how much you're spending, but I'm just trying to keep it simple for the, review. Even though you can find it everywhere, you do need 1600 to do 10 wishes, or 160 to do 1, so it can take a considerable amount of time to do even one 10 wish pull. Even finishing the main story and exploring the world extensively, I only got to do the 10 wish pulls a few times. But like I said, you can get through the main story without using this system, although getting better characters and weapons can make going through content much easier, especially later on. Along with the story and side quests, the main bulk of the game is made up of exploration and dungeons. The exploration is one of the stronger aspects of the game and is truly a pleasure to explore this world, although I really do wish the combat had more depth to it because you will be battling a ton of enemies while exploring. There are a ton of secrets to find, some being very well hidden, and you can tell the amount of care that went into creating the map. Sometimes just moving in a different direction, you will come across things you missed the first time through, and treasure chests will spawn until you reach adventure rank 40. So even going to areas you've already explored, you may find something that you missed the first time through. The dungeons are very hit or miss, some are very well done with fun combat challenges and some light puzzle elements, or even boss battles, but the majority of them are just a single generic room where you fight waves of enemies with a timer. Those generic dungeons are used to grind materials used for a variety of systems and will require an energy source known as resin in order to obtain loot at the end. The loot changes daily, so it can be frustrating if you need to find something and have to wait for the right day to get it. Resin is capped at 120 and regenerates over time and runs out very quickly. You can recharge it using a rare item or use your loot box currency. Everything you do will give you experience for your adventure rank, which is independent from character levels. While you do get experience from killing enemies, it's basically negligible, and you will have to use experience cards to level up characters. You get a ton at first, but later on they are harder to find, so much so that you will really have to focus on just a few characters to level. You also have level caps depending on your adventure rank and cannot level past a cap to reach the arbitrary adventure rank needed, then you can ascend your character. You'll need resources to ascend that can be quite rare, so again this limits how many characters you can level up. You'll also have to reach certain adventure ranks to do some quests, so there will be times that you'll have to grind before you can continue with a story quest, especially after prologue. I had to grind for quite some time. Now that we've gone over the basics, I'm going to go over my general thoughts on the game. Performance on the PS4 Pro was decent considering it's an open world game, especially in the opening areas, although later on I did run into quite a few frame rate issues in areas that were not as well optimized. The loading times were pretty slow too. The PlayStation 4 version also had issues loading in textures, especially in large cities where it could take upwards of 20 to 30 seconds sometimes for textures to load. Even on a mid-range PC, I was able to play at 4K 60 FPS with a few frame rate drops, but not too bad. Sadly, the PC version was limited to 60 FPS, which is almost unheard of in 2020, and I do hope they change that in the future. That being said, there's not many graphical options, and outside of the higher frame rate, the game looks gorgeous on both platforms. The only other real issue with PC was not being able to rebind keys with a keyboard and with a controller. This was especially obnoxious since for some reason on the PC version, the X and O buttons were reversed, which is very awkward to play with. They have stated in a future patch that they will make it so we can rebind key binds, but given it's such a simple and basic function, it's pretty unreasonable that we have to wait for it to be implemented. Also, the game will not recognize a controller on PC automatically, so that means every single time you boot up the game, you'll have to go into the options once the game loads up and switch from keyboard to controller. Not a huge deal, but still pretty annoying. As far as bugs and glitches go, while I did experience a few, overall it's one of the most polished games I've played in some time. The only real glitches I faced were minor graphical glitches. They have put out some notifications that there have been some quest progression bugs, but I didn't experience any of them, and it does seem like they are all fixed or will be fixed soon. While the prologue is quite basic, and the main story that's set up after the prologue has been done to absolute death in other games like a million times, I do have to say I still enjoyed it because the characters were so varied and interesting. Most voice actors did an amazing job too, which really helped sell the characters, although there's no sync between the audio and the character's mouth movement, which is a disappointment, and sometimes the mouths don't even move at all. But it's a free-to-play game, so I guess you can only expect so much. The side quests do a wonderful job of helping you get to know the characters and their particular quirks. When I saw Paimon, I said out loud, "Seriously?" But she was a delight and cracked me up quite a few times. A character like that could easily have been extremely annoying, so I'm glad they took the time to make the character likable and witty. You probably noticed I've been talking about everyone except the main character, and that's because the main character really has no personality. Silent protagonists are a thing of the past, and while it was necessary back in the day due to hardware limitations, now it just comes off as incredibly lazy, especially with a fully voiced cast. You can choose your dialogue, although it makes no difference to the story as far as I can tell. And there are some great lines. It would have given some much needed life to the main character if they had a voice actor. Without one, it feels like you're just moving a camera and you're not actually taking part of the story, you're just kinda there. What's even more odd is that your character actually does say a few lines in cutscenes, which makes the choice for a silent protagonist that much more baffling. It's a good thing that he had interesting characters, because while there are some standout side quests, most are just simple fetch quests or kill X amount of bad guy quests. There's really not much variety, and with the combat being so bland, it felt like a chore at times later on doing the side quests. The few boss encounters were surprisingly well done, but it's almost like the boss designer and the character combat designers never spoke to each other and were developing things for completely different games. The boss mechanics were great, but there's little enjoyment to be had because the combat is just too basic. I really thought you would get more moves later on since there's 2 talent trees, but all those do are add effects to your attacks or just give them a damage boost. They don't really add any more combat elements, or at least extra moves. You know, there are some with some characters that do add additional functionality, just, you know, not like another combo or something. And while we're on the topic of talent trees, let's go over them. One of my favorite aspects of RPGs is building up a character through their skills and talent trees, but when a developer puts no effort into it, it kind of ruins the fun. The skill tree consists of a constellation and talents. Both are the same in the sense that they add extra damage to your attacks or an extra function to an elemental skill, but the way you level up the trees differ. For the constellation, you only get points to go down a tree by getting a duplicate of a character, or in the case of the main character, you get points from story rewards. Ranking up your constellation can power up your character considerably, but if you don't get duplicates of a character that you like through loot boxes, then they can feel underpowered later in the game. It's an intentional, fundamental flaw in the gameplay design in order to annoy people into buying more loot boxes to strengthen their character. The talents are easier to rank up since they require materials that you can farm for, thankfully, assuming you have the resin to do so. Once you run out of quests, leveling up your adventure rank can be difficult, and you're relying on daily quests and doing activities that require resin, your energy resource, to level it up. This puts a hard cap on how fast you can level, and again, this is a system put in place to shove people into buying loot box currency to regenerate their resin or their energy. It hasn't been a huge problem for me yet, although now that I'm done with the story and there's really not many more side quests for me to do, it's becoming a bigger and bigger issue, because unless I spend money on the energy resource, there's really not much content for me to do to level up. Luckily, the daily quests do give a decent amount of adventure rank experience, but again, you only get a few of those every day, and it's not going to be enough to level you up. It will take, weeks potentially just to level off of those. There are a good amount of characters, and you can trial ones that you don't have in certain quests, but this highlights a glaring issue with the game. There's been a few characters that I've trialed that I've enjoyed much more than the characters I currently have, but there's no way to get them unless I spend potentially thousands of dollars. No, that's not a joke, it can seriously cost that much. And even if I did get one, I would still have to get doubles to power up their constellation, and I've already spent a ton of my experience cards, so I wouldn't be able to level them up for some time. Listen, it's a free-to-play game, and I know that the monetization schemes for them are pretty bad usually, but this is just insane. I really wish you could pick and choose what character you enjoyed for a fair price. I've mostly enjoyed the game so far and wouldn't mind spending some money, but the amount I would have to spend is just astronomical. Even if I spent $100 on loot box coins, there's almost no chance that I would get a character I wanted from loot boxes. While you do get some free credits playing the game, they are extremely stingy and it can take a considerable amount of time to earn one loot box pack, which in this game is 10 wishes again. There's achievements that give you a small pittance, but even doing all of them would be very time consuming and wouldn't give you very much. There's also a battle pass, but even by battle pass standards, it's pretty pathetic. You mostly just get gold and materials from it, and there's a cap on how much experience you can earn in a week, making getting it to the end very difficult, especially if you don't start playing the game right away at launch. Personally for me, I don't think there's any way I could finish it off even if I tried. There's so much to like and enjoying this game, it's really a shame that the monetization has to be so disgusting that it just drags down the game's quality with it. And yes, you can get by without spending anything, but you will not have as enjoyable of a time as someone who does spend money, and you'll have to grind endlessly to get what you need. And again, there will be limits on how much you can grind due to the energy resource. I personally have had no luck with the free loot boxes I've earned, so I've had to waste all my resources on characters that I don't particularly like and weapons that are not ideal. Wonder if I get a good character, I simply won't be able to use them for quite some time for this reason. All that being said, I am leaving out some things to avoid spoilers, and it's really a game about exploration. I don't want to ruin the surprise of certain things, which would take the enjoyment away from people. As far as the rating goes for this game, it's a free-to-play game, so the rating will have a huge asterisk next to it. I give Genshin Impact an 8 out of 10, keeping in mind that that's for a free-to-play game. If I compared it to a full-price game, it would get a 0. Loot boxes, especially ones done this poorly or really in any capacity, and along with battle passes, have no place in gaming and just drag down the experience. And also, as far as the 8 out of 10 goes, it's really the combat that drags down the score. Otherwise, it's a great game. That being said, I would only really recommend playing through the prologue. After that, the experience gets grindier and grindier, and without the compelling stories, it just gets really repetitive. Not to mention, you may run into progression issues if you don't have the right characters for certain boss encounters and dungeons. Given the state of the world right now, a lot of people are short on money, so I would recommend trying Genshin Impact through the prologue. You'll get 12 to 20 hours of good content depending on how much exploration you do, which honestly is more than you can get in a lot of AAA games coming out nowadays anyways. I'm really curious at how well the game will do long term. It seems like the monetization scheme is making a lot of people quit the game after a certain point, and the game will have to heavily rely on the whales to fund it. They are supposed to be adding in 5 more zones, but we will have to see if they get that far. It's really terrible. Some people have already spent thousands on the game, but if they don't keep doing that, we could see their money go to complete waste in the future as servers will shut down. Although spending thousands of dollars on any game is a complete waste in any capacity. Just look at Mobius Final Fantasy. It's shutting down soon. The Steam player base only got a week notice for that. Some people have spent an inconceivable amount of money on it, but everything they bought will be gone once the servers shut down. This is a huge problem that plagues all live service games, and unless they are one of the very, very few successful games, then they shut down pretty quickly usually. Anyways, if you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. There's a ton of games coming out over the next few months, so I'll be having quite a few reviews to do, so keep your eyes out for them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.